Good morning, all.
Good morning. We're just waiting for Dean to. Oh, there he is. He is on there.
Can you hear me? Although I should mention at the bat, I have a class that normally starts at 10 o'clock. It was stupid that they scheduled it. I told them not to, but I did push it back to 10:15. So I've got 45 minutes. So sorry about ducking off at that point.
Okay, James, can I call the meeting to order?
Yes, please proceed.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. What a week. I would like to get a motion. Everyone had got the agenda. I'd like to get a motion to approve the agenda, but I believe there are some changes that James just suggested.
I was just mentioning to the chair before we commence that it might be appropriate to deal with the briefings before their respective business items, so there's not a disconnect in the conversation. So if everyone's agreeable to that, just maybe let the chair know by raising.
So so number 6 to be before 5 is what you're asking?
So basically the briefing from Kiersey and Felix would occur before business item 7A, and Laura Blennis will be here shortly with Danica to speak to the creative industries profile sector report. So we could just deal with that briefing as well before business item 7B.
Okay. Okay, great. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda as changed? Councillor Neal and a seconder. Great. All in favor? Wonderful. Can I make a motion to, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Liz? And a seconder? Anyone to second the motion to approve the minutes? Great. Mark, and all in favor to approve the minutes as they were sent? Do we have any disclosure of pecuniary interest? No, we do not have any delegations either. So I believe we'll move on to briefings. And I invite Kiersey to speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with all of you about the proposed revisions to the Kingston Arts Council Plan for Administration of Arts Funding for the Corporation of the City of Kingston in 2021. Quite the title. I'm joined today by our grants coordinator, Felix Lee, who's also on the call. As per our service level agreement with the city, just to remind you, the KAC is charged with the administration of the City of Kingston Arts Fund. The Board of Directors of the Kingston Arts Council maintains oversight of KAC staff and our administration of CCAF. And the KAC provides quarterly CCAF reports to cultural services to keep them updated. As you may know, each year a committee consisting of organizations, collectives, jurors, community members, arts practitioners, KAC staff, and City of Kingston staff reviews the program's plan for administration, which we call the Plan for Admin. The Plan for Admin is a really vital document that serves as the foundation of the CCAF program, and it ensures its successful administration. So a draft plan for admin for the coming year is annually presented to and approved by the KAC Board of Directors, by the Arts Advisory Committee, as well as the city's Arts, Recreation, and Community Policies Committee, and then moves forward for review and approval by Kingston City Council. So in 2020, this is a different year, as we all know, and we really recognized, both the city and KAC recognized that there was an unprecedented impact of COVID-19 on Kingston generally, and in particular on our arts and culture sector. As a result, the KAC implemented an expanded consultation process this year. This engaged organizations, collectives, and artists with an aim of really understanding current needs, opportunities, and challenges in our arts community, and what we expect to see, what they expect to face in the next year. This consultation process focused on analyzing the impacts of the pandemic and allowed us to really examine some potential responsive changes to the 2021 CCAF. So just to remind you, major structural changes will be considered through a future consultant-led review through the city. So just to give you a bit of background about this consultation process, in September and in early October 2020, we hosted 4 roundtables with 19 attendees. We also issued a survey that had 28 responses. The survey asked artists, arts workers, and representatives of arts organizations to share how COVID-19 had impacted their arts practice, activities, and finances. And at the roundtables, participants discussed changes to community impact and funding, as well as the type of support that they expect to need to continue working in the next year. In addition to the survey and roundtables, the KAC consulted with jurors involved in the decision-making for this program over the last 14 years, as well as other granting agencies across the province, as well as City of Kingston staff. KAC staff received feedback from the Arts Advisory Committee on September 17th, as well as the KAC Board of Directors on October 7th. The KAC board approved this draft 2021 plan for admin that is before you on October 26th with no recommended changes. So at this time, I'll ask Felix to review the feedback that we received through the consultation and speak a bit about how this feedback has informed our proposed changes to the plan for admin for 2021. So I'll pass it over to Felix.
Hello, everyone. So as Kiersey said, what I'll do is start with a high-level review of the major themes we got from the feedback process and then move into the significant changes to the plan in response to those items. So throughout this process, participants in the consultation identified consistent opportunities and challenges that have arisen as a result of COVID-19. The major issues that they discussed were decreased revenue, which came as a result of restrictions on gathering, causing most activities, programs, and events to be canceled for a significant portion of the year. And it also affected private sector revenue and donation. At the same time, they reported increased cost. So as artists and organizations sought ways to work safely, they had to pivot to small socially distanced activity or to digital programming, and many were not prepared to make that shift. So it carried significant additional expense because they were forced to purchase new equipment, to hire professionals, or to invest in increased cleaning. The most common answer we received is the third item, uncertainty. So the inability to make long-term plans seriously impacted the stability of organizations and the income of independent artists. Public health guidelines, as we know, changed quickly and often over the past 8 months. And many people were not sure what rules would be applicable as they were planning for the future. Capacity. So many artists and organizations face a lack of staff and volunteer resources or the infrastructure necessary to continue to adapt their activities in the long term. A major component of this is that most individual artists relied on either the gig economy or the service sector for additional income. And as the pandemic goes on, the ability of these groups to pivot quickly diminishes. The last item was collaboration and community. Many artists and organizations reported that they felt a loss in the sense of their community and that they struggled to work collaboratively and to work with social distancing at the same time. While they are seeking ways to work safely, that we know requires time, planning, equipment, training, and resources. Many face a lack of safe space to gather because they often relied on public spaces like schools or churches that are no longer accessible to them. However, they also identified some opportunities. The shift towards digital activity and virtual events did open a lot of groups to new audiences who did not previously have access to their work, and many reported that they were focused on growing these new audiences on these platforms. And while restrictions on travel did seriously impact tourism, many groups saw that opportunity to refocus on local programming that engaged primarily Kingston residents. As a result of these challenges and opportunities, they highlighted 3 major areas that they felt needed review or potential change for 2021 in CCAF. These were the program objectives, the application and adjudication process, and the overall need for increased accessibility and flexibility in the program. The program objectives, they felt, needed to respond to new changes in community need. Specifically, it felt that there would be increased emphasis on local engagement and community building activities like mentorship and collaboration. Local artists need to be supported as they adapt to working under new conditions, and this should happen through capacity building projects and professional opportunities from arts organizations who hire and competitively pay them. The application and adjudication process must be aligned with the program objectives very closely. They wanted to see strong links through new program objectives to the structure of the application and to the adjudication criteria. Additionally, a large topic was the way that we measure community impact. As we know, CCAF is a community impact forward program, and many participants cited that they felt that we needed to move away from revenue generation and audience number as measurements because both of these things are becoming more and more unreliable. Instead, they wanted to see evaluation consider how applicants would demonstrate their need and their benefit to the community, as well as the strength of their contingency and financial planning. Additionally, the KAC must address the accessibility of funding and increase the flexibility of the process. As many of you know, we moved to digital applications only, no printed copies in 2020. This was an appreciated first step to reducing the burden on applicants, but many still felt that the forms were long and too repetitive. The streamlined application process that provides a wider variety of types of answers and expanded supplementary material would improve the accessibility of the forms. The KAC additionally is looking at identifying and addressing barriers, particularly for small unincorporated groups. So for your reference, you did receive a complete list of all the changes to the plan for admin, but at this time, I would like to highlight the most significant ones that tie into the feedback that I've just reviewed. The first one is to the program objectives. So that was, as I said, a big topic in the consultation. This appears in the section entitled Objectives, page 5, section B. They have been reformatted in response to the consultation process, but also in response to longstanding issues of clarity, concision, and alignment with other comparable programs. In order to provide clarity, the KAC has separated the objectives that the city is seeking to accomplish through this program from the objectives for the CCAF-funded operations and projects. Additionally, the objectives for the operations and projects have been reformatted to reflect the impact of the pandemic and to ensure increased accountability, viability, and sustainability of grant recipients. The objectives have been rephrased to emphasize Kingston artists, community need, collaboration, partnership, arts access, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. The next change is to eligible costs, which appear both in operating, page 7, section C1E, and in project on page 12, section C2G. The change is identical in both sections. And what we've done is make an update to specifically include costs related to accessibility or minor equipment purchase to meet new health and safety standards. The next change is the requirements for allocating funding, which appears in operating grant size, page 8, C1G, and project grant size, page 13, C2J. These sections have been updated to reflect the new language in the program objectives. This means that in operating, there is a new emphasis on sustainability, viability, and accountability, and in project on viability, accountability, and response to community need. The rationale that the jury may use to reduce an operating grant, which appears in grant stability, page 8, C1H, has been expanded to include the inability to demonstrate viability or capacity to deliver and the failure to meet CCAF objectives. While the rationale has been expanded, I would like to note that the cap on reductions is still in place as it's been in previous years. So the jury can only recommend a reduction of up to 20% of the previous year's funding allocation, as was the case last year and every year before. The maximum amount for project grants, which appears in grant size, page 13, C2J, has been lowered to $15,000. And the minimum project grant amount of $5,000 has been added. In previous years, project grants were set at $20,000 maximum with no minimum. This change was made to ensure that projects are awarded a grant amount that is sufficient to enable their success, and it spreads the available funds more evenly across successful applicants. The final change that I'd like to highlight is to the adjudication criteria, page 14, section D for both streams. These have been revised to strongly reflect the program objectives in response to the feedback we received. And we've added 2 new points specifically addressing how organizations and collectives have committed to hiring local professional artists and how they have committed to compensating their artists and other employees at industry standard rates. In response to feedback around financial uncertainty, the emphasis on revenue generation has been removed, and it has been replaced with the demonstration of effective use of CCAF funds to benefit the community. Additionally, grant applicants are now required, rather than simply encouraged, to demonstrate diversity, inclusion, and access according to the definitions that we provide in the Plan for Admin. I'd also like to highlight a few things that we are working on as administrators. While they're not specifically delineated in this document, they are closely tied to the changes that we've made and the feedback that I've highlighted. So we are going to streamline the application process. That's something that we work on every year, and in 2021, we're going to do it again. We are going to align the form closely with the adjudication criteria and the objectives, and we're also looking to streamline it by shortening the application form itself and make it more in line with other comparable funding programs. We want to keep our high level of support for applicants. This was something that we actually received, very pleased to receive a lot of positive feedback about it in the consultation process. And so in 2021, we are planning 2 info sessions instead of what we typically would offer 1. And we are also planning a grant writing workshop that will complement the program. We are also looking at increasing accessibility by expanding the training for jurors. Typically, jurors are given training in a written document. And in 2021, we're going to offer them an in-person training session as well, instead of or in addition to that process, to make it more accessible. We are also actively seeking solutions to barriers for small unincorporated groups. So this includes investigating the ways the KAC can support them in the process to find insurance, which is a requirement for this program. And also we are looking at ways that we can connect small collectives with incorporated organizations to act as sponsors, which is a long-standing application mechanism in the program. And that concludes everything I have to share today.
Thanks, Felix. So we're happy to answer any questions that there may be.
Colin?
Thanks, Nadine, and through you, I just wanted to highlight too, in addition to all the great information Felix and Kiersey have provided, that the longer document also looks different, the plan for administration. There's been efforts on the part of the KAC to make very explicit for yourselves and others reading the plan, specific responses to COVID-19 and to highlight the changes that have been made so that all the things that have been reviewed are more fully apparent within the document that I have certainly found helpful as I've been reading through it. So thank you for that.
Okay, great. Does anyone else have any questions for Kiersey or Felix?
I think Alicia was.
Alicia, yes.
This looks fabulous. It's very thoughtful and very thorough, and I really appreciate this. And I really like that now there's a requirement for EDII to be addressed rather than just an encouragement. I think that is really important. I just have a question, and this may only speak to my ignorance. The grant size being between 5,000 and 15,000, which I also think it's great to have a minimum set, and that this will allow funds to be spread more evenly across successful applicants. Will it also allow for an increased number of successful applicants?
Felix, would you like to address that?
Yes, it depends on how many applications we receive. So actually in 2020, we had about 5 fewer than we normally would. So the number of successful applicants as a proportion of the number of applications looked a little different. But that wasn't very surprising to us given the timing of the application deadline in April. If we're looking at the program history, typically the successful application proportion is between 50 and 60% in projects. So it's already quite high. So if we're expecting this to be a year similar to 2019, I would think that it probably won't increase the number of successful applicants. We'll be looking at probably the higher 60% range instead of 50, but it will stay in a similar number. It really also depends on the requests for projects because they don't have the same stable funding as operating. So in some years, we have a number of high quality projects that are asking for $15,000, and that would limit the number that we could award it to. Whereas if we have a number of high quality projects that come in looking for $8,000 or $10,000, that looks quite different because we reward as a proportion of their request amount, if that answers your question fully.
Does anyone else have any questions? Mark, was that your hand up?
Hi, everybody. I know the topic of shared insurance has come up over the years. Is there like an example of another, maybe in another city or elsewhere of this actually happening? Because I think, you know, like I work with 2 organizations and I did the math on it the other day. We've spent over $100,000 in insurance in the lifetime of the 2 organizations that I am a part of. And neither one of us has ever made a claim. And then COVID rolls around, you know, and organizations are being impacted in various ways, whether it's cancellations or whatever. And I've not met any organization that has received any sort of compensation due to COVID. So you know, these documents are 100 pages long. My better sense told me that when the film festival canceled this year, that we probably weren't going to be compensated in any way. I did reach out to our insurance agent and they're like, no, there's no coverage for anything like that. So I wasn't completely surprised, but I guess my point being, you know, we've paid a lot into insurance over the years, never used it. So I feel like, you know, maybe insurance companies look at arts organizations as being high risk, but in my experience, you know, we've treaded pretty lightly into the world of insurance. It would be nice if there was something that could cover multiple organizations. So I don't know if there's an example of that in another market or if that's something that, you know, I could help further along somehow.
I'm happy to address that. It's certainly something we're exploring. As part of our work this year, the KAC has been integral in creating this Alliance of Arts Councils of Ontario, which has been a really wonderful way for us to share knowledge across arts councils. And certainly not all of the arts councils across the province have granting programs, but for those that do, I have specifically reached out to find out if any of them have sort of an umbrella insurance kind of program for their organizations and so forth. None of the organizations that I've been in contact with have anything kind of like I think you're envisioning. Certainly some of the arts councils do programming themselves, creative programming in the community, and so they'll have sort of an umbrella policy to cover what they're doing in various locations, but not something where there are a number of kind of collectives and organizations under the same policy. So that's something we're still exploring. We are reaching out to various insurance companies that we know our collectives and organizations have worked with in the past, just to see if either there is an opportunity for something that supports through a larger kind of group insurance program, or if we can just kind of establish better relationships with these particular companies to make that that process of collectives and organizations reaching out to get their insurance in place a little more smooth, and ensure that these companies understand what CCAF is about, understand Kingston and its particular dynamics. So we're also looking at that, and as Felix mentioned, just we'll be looking at how we can connect smaller groups, ad hoc groups and collectives with organizations, you know, like yours that have kind of insurance in place to support them. So I don't know that that answers your question other than, you know, we are exploring that. We're looking to see if there are examples of that, but I just have not found examples within the arts sector, at least at this point, but I'm happy to explore further beyond.
I'm sure the insurance companies aren't going to want to do that. So I'm sure they're not, if we just generally inquire, they're going to probably not be that helpful, but yeah, it would be, you know, that would be a good chunk of funds that you could roll back into CCAF if, you know, hypothetically this is just an arbitrary number, but $10,000 to cover like all organizations or something like that, right? It would be, anyway.
Sure, I think, Colin, you had your hand up?
Thanks, Nadine, and through you. I just wanted to also share that I've been having ongoing conversations with the insurance specialist here at the City of Kingston, because we've obviously had questions also about insurance as it relates to COVID, with programming going online and digital and sort of different sets of risks. And I have been told that those issues are being looked at. I've not been provided any kind of update at this point regarding how that might impact the city's expectations around insurance. But I did want to share in response to your question, Mark. It was a number of years ago that I brought Alan McLeod to meet with the Arts Advisory Committee. He's our senior legal counsel now, our acting city solicitor. And you know, we wanted to have a discussion about this insurance piece. And I can't speak on Alan's behalf, but listening to what you said, Mark, I think I would anticipate his response would be, then you're able to sleep easy because there hasn't been an incident that's required a multi-million-dollar payout based on the insurance that you've had. So, you know, the cost benefit analysis is one where you haven't had to draw upon the insurance because things have been delivered safely and effectively, and that's what insurance is for. So, you know, we constantly have conversations at the city about the levels of requirement, and I know that that continues to be a strain, not just on arts organizations, but all groups that interact with the city and use city facilities, parks and other things. And it is an ongoing conversation, so it's not one that's going away. And, you know, I'm happy also, because I know that, as Kirsty has said, the Arts Council is exploring opportunities or alternatives related to insurance, to also connect the Arts Council with our insurance specialist as part of those discussions to see how we can support that process.
Great, thank you, Colin. Dean, you have a question?
Yeah, apologies if I've missed that. I'm just wondering, has there been any surveys or any sort of questionnaires done on how Kingston arts organizations and individuals are doing? I'm sure that in the applications that you guys saw in April, it probably reflected a lot of the fear and kind of trying to make plans to get through it all. But I was just curious if the city or the Arts Council, or if there is anything that kind of looked at as a questionnaire or survey as to how the Kingston arts scene is doing.
To answer your question, Dean, we did send out a survey this fall as part of this extended consultation and did have response. Certainly in the spring, rather than kind of survey organizations that were being surveyed from all directions, we instead ran a series of community roundtables where we had conversations. Certainly in the early days of the pandemic, there was a great need to kind of check in, see how everyone was doing. That was a great opportunity for us to see, to get a lay of the land and figure out how we move forward. So we did a similar process this fall, as I said, with this one survey, and then with four roundtables where we invited, did a specific reach out to arts organizations and then also to individual artists in the community to participate. And if they couldn't attend the roundtable or complete the survey, to speak with us individually. So there hasn't been a formal sort of widespread, you know, all-inclusive kind of survey that we can point to that really gets, you know, statistically significant data, I would say, in terms of what we're doing. But, you know, we're pretty assured through the feedback that we received that there's a lot of consistency in terms of what people were saying with these issues that came up.
Right.
Danica?
Danica?
Thanks, Nadine, and through you. I just wanted to offer sort of an additional response to your question, Dean, in regards to the Kingston Economic Recovery Team led by the mayor. So this is work that is undergoing now to develop short and long-term strategies that really does respond to this moment of COVID-19. Tricia Baldwin from the Isabel is the cultural sector as part of this Kingston Economic Recovery team. And through those conversations and those regular meetings, there have been discussions with arts organizations and artists about their needs moving forward. So there's another avenue to collect that feedback, and our department is offering staff support to that working group specifically.
Great, thanks, Danica. Do we have any other questions for the Kingston Arts Council staff for their report? Okay, James, are we moving on to 7C before we invite Laura to speak? She's been patient on there.
Sorry, Nadine, I think Councillor Neal had his hand up.
Oh, Councillor Neal.
Thank you. Just a quick question for Colin. I know that a lot of the insurance that the city does, we self-insure. Is there any possibility that the city could provide the insurance at a much better rate and let it fall under our self-insurance, which I know a lot of the city is self-insured. So we cover our own, and we have a person that actually is the sole person, I believe, on the file for insurance claims.
Through you, Nadine, as chair, we've had those conversations, Councillor Neal. I've never been informed that there is that possibility. It seems like it's a general practice across the corporation that the city helps to facilitate the acquisition of insurance by either people we're funding or people who are using city facilities. But I think your question is one that's always worth continuing to explore, especially in light of COVID-19, if there's any kind of changes within the industry that we need to be aware of.
I think that would be great.
Yeah.
And staff always cringe when I ask this question. Would that need a motion to council? Thank you. You'd rather not answer that question. That's okay.
I'm happy to have some more conversation with the insurance specialists and legal services and get back to you and this committee with more direction on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you. James, just in reference to my other query there, are we moving?
So it would probably make sense to just check in with the two members of the public quick to see if they wish to provide comment on this matter. And then once we're done that, we can probably move the recommendation to send this to the Arts Advisory Committee, and then we can deal with the next file in its entirety as well. So if we are moving to the members of the public, if either of the two members of the public wish to speak, I would ask that they use the raise hand tool within Zoom to identify yourself as a speaker. That button is accessible after clicking on the participants icon in the lower menu on the left, and then there should be a button on the right hand side that says raise hand. So we'll give you folks 10 seconds or so to hit that button, and then we'll move on. All right, Madam Chair, it does not appear that the public wishes to speak, so we can proceed with a recommendation if there's no more discussion.
Okay, so we're moving on to 7C, my update for the Mayor's Arts Awards.
Sorry, Nadine, if I might, I think what James has indicated from a process point of view is that this is the information from the Kingston Arts Council has come forward for the consideration of the committee. And even though it's not accompanied by a report with a recommendation, the practice is for the Arts Advisory Committee to pass a motion to endorse their support.
Oh, to endorse, okay.
For the plan as it's been presented, so that when staff go forward to the Arts Recreation Community Policy Committee, we can let them know that the Arts Advisory Committee has been consulted and is in support of this work.
Okay, great. Do we have a motion to endorse the report that was provided? Alicia, and do we have a seconder? Dean, and then all in favor. Great.
So the next item after that
Okay.
vote is the.
I can hardly hear you, James.
Sorry, are you able to hear me better now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, it's my microphone. I'll have to look into that. So the next item is Laura O'Blennis will be providing a briefing, which is actually a PowerPoint presentation on the Creative Industries Profile Sector Report. So once she is done with that presentation, we'll deal with the associated staff report, and then we'll get to the Mayor's Arts Award working group update.
Okay, great. Okay, welcome, Lori.
Good
Laura.
morning, everybody. Hi. Do you want me to start my video, James, or just leave the video off?
Probably makes sense just to leave the video off while the PowerPoint presentation is ongoing, but then you can turn it on afterwards.
For questions, sure, no problem. Well, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And I know Danica and Colin are also on the call and have been tremendous as we've been going through this exercise. And so what we want to run through with you, we know we only have about 10 minutes to run through the material, and then certainly happy to entertain any questions that you may have. We want to really just run you through what we've been doing to be able to pull together this strategy to give you some context of where some of the recommendations are coming from, and then again open it up for any questions at that time. So let's move to the next slide, please. So the Creative Industries Report has been developed at the same time as, you may be aware, there's an integrated economic development strategy taking place in partnership with Kingston Economic Development and the City of Kingston. And the purpose of this particular strategy was to really look at an inventory of existing creative industries within Kingston and how we can better support these industries to be able to expand the sector and enhance economic development opportunities. These recommendations from the Creative Industries Profile and strategy have been also weaved into the integrated economic strategy so that there's alignment and crossover. And I'll explain that a bit when we get into the recommendations. Next slide, please. So in terms of the methodology, we looked at over 380 data points that were collected, including asset mapping. We've done one-on-one consultation. So we did a number of interviews with key stakeholders. We did a quantitative survey with locals, and we had about 63 respondents on the local surveys specifically targeted to folks that are working in the creative industries. We looked at a global trend review. We did an exemplary jurisdiction review. Some of our consultations also included others in exemplary jurisdictions, so we can learn what they're doing and see if there's anything that we could apply in the Kingston area. Next slide, please. So some of the target outcomes include identifying growth opportunities in the core sectors, looking at cluster development opportunities within the subsectors, and we'll talk about which subsectors kind of rose to the top and emerged. Looking at a cohesive economic development approach for creative industries, and as I mentioned, with the integrated economic strategy, looking at identifying short-term and long-term opportunities to support growth, really from an economic development lens, again, to be able to support these industries from a business and economic perspective, and then looking at short and long-term opportunities to support business expansion and potential investment attraction for the city. Next slide, please. In terms of metrics for success, these are very similar in what you'll see in both the integrated plan. There's also a rural Kingston strategy that's been developed, and all three are aligned in terms of looking at these as assets in our community in Kingston. And so 6 of the top metrics for success, and we know these are fairly broad and fairly generic in other markets. We've also looked at other types of metrics by recommendation that you'll see in the final report when that becomes public. Certainly looking at how we can grow GDP, supporting an increased number of business startups, driving tourism-related opportunities for new creative industry product development, leveraging our existing creative assets, building collaboration among cultural producers, and increase in intellectual property creation for commercialization within the creative industries. And that aligns again with broader economic opportunities with the other strategies. Next slide, please. And you can go ahead to the next slide. So in terms of looking at creative industries, according to UNESCO, there's tons of different definitions, but we needed to sort of pick a path for the purpose of this exercise. And so we looked at what is in creative industries is including the goods and services produced by the cultural industries and those that depend on innovation, including many types of research and software development. And the creative industries as part of 4 broad groups, which is heritage, arts, media, and functional creations. And if you can go to the next slide, you'll see a table on the next slide that shows sort of the subsectors and then categories and components within. So as you can see, it's quite comprehensive in terms of all of the tremendous assets and activities taking place within cultural industries within the city of Kingston. This is a breakdown that we worked on closely with the team within the city, Danica and Colin, in terms of really understanding what are those broader sectors, what are the subsectors within those areas, and what are some categories within the subsectors, so that we could really try to understand where the emerging subsectors, looking at the top 3 is what we were targeting for this exercise and how that could emerge. Next slide, please. In terms of the community assets, there's a total of 236 assets in creative industries, and this includes infrastructure, programs, services, amenities, community meeting spaces, historical sites, libraries, museums, and art galleries. And we'll go to the next slide because it shows a graphic illustration. So in the heritage sector, there's 82 assets in heritage. In the art sector, 58, 52 in the media, and in the functional creation sector, 42. So as you can see, and this is top to bottom, the greatest concentration being heritage, no surprise in terms of the tremendous heritage that Kingston is certainly known for. Next slide. So some key takeaways from the community assets. There's a relatively balanced, wide variety of assets in all 4 main sectors, which is great. I've already highlighted heritage with 24 museums and historical sites, as well as your 3 art galleries and numerous historical buildings. Among the sectors, live music also has a really good portion of the overall inventory, which we want to highlight. And again, probably no surprise to all of those around the table today. Next slide. In terms of total business count, and I know we want to get into the recommendations for the conversation, but I do think it's important to highlight a few things from this. There's a total of 340 businesses as of 2019, which has increased by 58% over the last 5 years. That's certainly notable. The sector represents 2.6% of total Kingston businesses, which includes those with and without formal employment and unclassified businesses. The percentage is a little bit low compared to the provincial, which is at 6.5%, and the national at 6%, all the more reason to support the growth of businesses in this sector and take advantage of these tremendous assets that you have in the community. Next slide, please. A quick snapshot here in terms of where you see the highest business count by percentage. Graphic design services, in terms of we see the comparison of 2019 and 2014. So that growth percentage that I highlighted in a previous slide. So certainly significant growth in graphic design and photography services, musical groups and artists, independent writers and authors seen tremendous bumps, interior design services, motion picture video production, internet broadcasting. Really across the board, you've seen fairly significant growth in each of the categories, which is very exciting, and again validating that this industry is certainly moving ahead and growing quite nicely. Next slide, please. So in terms of the takeaways for the business counts, there's certainly positive momentum. The entire sector is growing at a fairly exponential rate in the city. The 61% growth rate in creative industries in 5 years exceeds the growth of the 2-level NAIC sectors, including agriculture at 57% and information. So that's very exciting that there is higher growth in these areas in the creative industries than these other 2 areas. Next slide, please. In terms of workforce, the creative industries have a total workforce of 1,400 people, 1,417, and that's increased by about 4% since 2014. So not as significant a growth in the establishment of the businesses. Certainly seems to be a desire to create the businesses and greater support. What we surmise from the exercise is that the businesses that are being established have the potential, but need some support to be able to bump up this workforce potential. Motion picture and video production saw the largest workforce growth from 2014 to 2019, and the broadcasting, software publishing, post-production, and other motion picture and video industries saw the lowest workforce growth in the same period of time. Next slide, you'll just see a bar chart similar to the other one. And so you see here highest workforce growth. Motion picture and video exhibition, again, no surprise, you're having tremendous success in film, and you'll see that as one of the emerging sectors. And libraries would be the ones that have seen the biggest bumps since 2014. Next slide. So key takeaways. So the top 3 sectors account for 0.6% of total Kingston employees. So certainly not a huge contributor to workforce, but tremendous potential given the increase in the business counts during this period. There's a large drop off between the 3rd and 4th place sectors, making the impact certainly in film more profound. Any significant cultural industry employer, public and post-secondary libraries and library staff, there's an opportunity to really leverage this area for overall support for the creative sectors and as creative producers themselves. And yeah, unknown for how many of these employees focus on digital side of their profession. It's just not broken down to that level of detail in the NAICS codes classifications. Next slide. So let's talk about a couple of community inputs before we run you through the recommendations. So from a community inputs perspective, and you can just go to the next slide. So there were several components of engagement. I mentioned earlier, there was one-on-one consultations. We met with about 25 individuals individually. We conducted a survey with about 63 folks that participated. And then we also launched, as part of the integrated economic strategy, through the Get Involved Kingston site, a survey that included questions around the creative industries. The survey was open for 3 weeks and had a total of 375 surveys that were completed. Next slide. When Kingston residents were asked which of the following areas do you think have the most potential to grow supported by the city, the top 3 responses were film and other broadcasting at 51%, live music at 40%, and music production at 35%. Again, no surprise, because we're seeing these 2 certainly rise to the top in pretty much every category and feedback that we'd received through the exercise. Next slide, please. A couple of highlights when individuals were asked what is the greatest opportunity for creative industries. The top 3 responses were increasing collaboration between artists, community, and residents at 27%, building infrastructure to support artists and events at 17%, leveraging its proximity to larger cities, that certainly your market access to 14.5 million people, which we were showing in the integrated strategy at 15%, is seen as a real opportunity. And then when individuals were in the creative industries were asked what are the top 3 challenges faced by those working in creative industries, they highlighted building sustainable revenues at 70%, pretty significant, accessing funding 50%, and having sufficient customers 50%. So again, that need to really support those businesses while the business counts are emerging. How do we help them grow and scale? And you'll see this in some of the recommendations. Next slide. So let's talk about the strategy framework. We have, next slide. So based on the inputs that we received throughout the various components of the engagement, we have 2 pillars, 6 themes, and 15 recommendations. And so when you look, I'm going to break this down. We're not going to go into tremendous detail on these, but just from a high level, share with you some of the rationale behind these. In pillar 1, we have, actually, let's go to the next slide, please, because it has a little bit about each recommendation. And next slide, we'll talk about film and music in a second. Yeah, here we go. So telling the narrative, we have, we really believe there's an opportunity to be able to really tell the story of Kingston and the creative industries. I mentioned the 14.5 million people access. Kingston is at the heart of the Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal corridor. And as you would anticipate, that provides tremendous opportunity for, tire traffic. Your tourism industry is thriving, and there's a real opportunity for increasing the product development on the creative industries. But the first step is really to tell that narrative and get people excited about it. And so there's 3 recommendations under telling the narrative: promoting creative industries through new and existing marketing campaigns, create local creative industry campaign that highlights the ecosystem and celebrates artists, engaging in collaborative and participatory storytelling campaigns. And this can be done through existing campaigns to certainly maximize any investments that are already being made. We believe there's an opportunity to support emerging creative industries, and there's really 2 that rose to the top, and theater is a 3rd for consideration. Certainly, film and music rose to the top in really every aspect that we looked at, from workforce to business count to validation and feedback from both the community and the one-on-one discussions, as well as the jurisdiction review that we had conducted. There's a real opportunity to better support the ones that are rising to the top, i.e. film and music. And there is as a subsidiary sector, looking at theater as well from a performing arts perspective. And we can talk about that further. And then establishing alignment between stakeholders on film, music, and theater. So making sure that there's alignment with current activities and helping to support that. The third is building creative industry entrepreneurs. And so we mentioned the business counts has risen significantly, but workforce has not actually risen in the same at the same pace. And so there really is an opportunity to support these entrepreneurs and look at creative industries as entrepreneurs. So leveraging existing programming that exists. There's accelerator programs. It could be very exciting to have a track for creative industry entrepreneurs to help give them the tools they need to be successful as business people, not just as artists. Exploring and identifying programs that may assist them with access to seed funding, startup funding, or that's available for marginalized artists and youth artists as well. And examining best practices for digital platforms for greater communication. So certainly building those entrepreneurs, super key. Let's go to the next slide, please. Partnership and collaboration, spaces and places, and diversity inclusion are the final three themes. Within partnership and collaboration, we are recommending a creative industries working group that will be comprised of a combination of folks from the city, as well as some of those leading groups that where there's significant traction, particularly again in film and music. Looking at new and applied research and development funding. It's really interesting to note that Queen's University has received the highest percentage from SSHRC funding for the arts in the province of Ontario, which is very exciting. We could leverage additional opportunities for R&D funding to support a variety of different areas within the creative industries and hopefully help to provide additional support to the creative industry artists and business people. And building collaborative partnerships with communities outside of Kingston. There's certainly a moving trend or a growing trend for leveraging either within Ontario, within Canada, and in other jurisdictions that are aligned with the sectors that you're looking at. We think there's great opportunity and interest there based on our preliminary discussions. In terms of spaces and places, leveraging and creating greater awareness of existing venues. Venues was highlighted, and the need for access to venues that are not necessarily, that are tied to also families and a broader audiences that they can access more easily. Lots is happening. It's about creating greater awareness of what is available and identifying existing spaces that could be rethought or reanimated to serve creative industries. One of the things that came up was co-working spaces and a space they could be in with other artists, and really helping to harness that for collaboration as well. And then certainly finally, diversity and inclusion. So undertaking research to better understand the issues of diversity in the sector. We had a little bit of a sample on that, but we do think that based on the city's priority of diversity and inclusion, we think that you could go a little bit deeper in that. And that's something perhaps the working group could take on. And then, of course, establishing diversity and inclusion commitments for the creative industry. So really just establishing some benchmarks and some metrics that we want to target to really support this sector from a diversity and inclusion perspective. We're going to skip through a few of the next slides because I've kind of covered it just with these two slides. So let's just go to the next slide, and you'll see this. And I'm not sure, James, if James shares the slide deck with you, but we've put together sort of the recommendation and the rationale for these recommendations. But again, given the interest of time, I'll just leave that for now because I've covered it. So let's just go until we reach the end of these tables, James. And then we talk a little bit about next steps, and then we can open it for discussion. So these recommendations are intended to simply ignite the imagination and explore the possibilities in the creative industries in Kingston. Additional due diligence will be required to just prioritize the recommendations, allocate your resources, and then really think through how we can maximize what's currently happening and really focus in some of these areas to really maximize the impact that could take place from both an economic perspective and an overall community perspective. Next slide. So to conclude, in terms of some of the next steps and what the team will be looking at next, and from the team, I'm referring to Danica and Colin and their group, prioritizing the recommendations, looking at the execution and implementation, meeting with some of the lead partners. Each recommendation in the report has the identified key partners that could participate in the implementation of these recommendations. So meeting with them and just identifying the roles. establishing that working group to help lighten the load a little bit and bring everybody together. And then looking specifically at the identified subsectors of film, music, and theater, and developing specific action plans and prioritization of activities for those subsectors. And that concludes what we wanted to run through in the presentation. And with that, I will throw it back to you, Madam Chair, and for any questions that the participants may have.
That's fantastic, Laura. Yeah, do we have any questions from the committee here? What a lot of work. Bravo.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Team effort.
Colin?
Thanks, Nadine. And through you, I might just provide a little bit more context too. And thanks, Laura. That was amazing. And Danica, please jump in if you want. Just to anchor this for the committee, that Council, under its strategic priorities, had identified fostering arts, cultural, and social enterprise as a priority. So it really stems out of the work that Council was wanting to see happen. And, to Laura's point, I think that we've certainly seen huge growth in recent years, largely due to the establishment of a film office and the work of Alex Jansen to develop the film industry here locally. And lots of people already have strong attachments to the notion that Kingston is really well positioned to be a music city. So there are some threads here that we want to be able to support and further. And Laura knows this. When I've been part of conversations, I'm also thinking about sort of what I would call the USP, or unique selling propositions, that differentiate Kingston as a location for creative industries. So potentially lots of different communities could pursue things like film and theater, film and music. But one of the things that I'm particularly interested in, and we've had lots of conversation about, is the heritage side of the equation. And by heritage, thinking about it in the broadest terms, because we've also had a lot of conversations about Indigenous culture and heritage, for example. And while the data right now isn't there to substantiate pursuing that work, that's something that certainly Danica and I are keen to do, that there's the information that Laura's outlined that's really about what's here and what can be built. At the same time, I feel as the city and through cultural services, we have a responsibility and a desire to pursue some of those other things that aren't as immediately apparent, that I think would help to position Kingston, building on all the great things that Laura has identified, as a place where history is living. And we talk on our heritage side of our portfolio a lot about the notion of museum without walls, and really creating space for increased presence and experience of Indigenous culture and heritage. So I just wanted to provide a little bit more sort of context for this discussion as well. I don't know, Danica, if you want to add.
Great, Danica.
Thanks, Nadine, through you. Just to add to what Colin outlined, through this process, it was also important to really identify, and Laura mentioned this, the city's role in supporting creative industries and how the city is to work with Kingston Economic Development Corporation and Tourism Kingston and other core stakeholders to support the creative industries. And so, to Colin's point about creative industries, and obviously focusing through this work and in the integrated strat plan on the emerging subsectors, within the recommendations in the plan, there is a reference to visual arts, heritage, Indigenous culture, because there are some obvious ways we can integrate those sectors within the recommendations, even though they may not be named as top emerging creative industry subsectors. There are, again, with cultural services involvement, opportunities for them to become part of the recommendations we're supporting in this moment.
Okay, does anyone have any questions about the presentation here? Katie?
Hi, I was just wondering, I haven't seen the slide deck. I was wondering if it could be shared, or if it has been shared, maybe I'd go dig it up, but that was really great. And I'd love to just sort of dive in a little deeper.
Great. I have a question actually for Laura, and I wondered, or maybe it's for cultural services for Danica and Colin, how the Limestone Board, if they were consulted, because I know there are a few creative programs at the high school level and also elementary late years, and how they play in the, in this scene, because I know that they were cut back, almost eliminated, the Studio LC program at LCVI, which is the film program for high school students. Like, I just wondered if that was part of the study at all, not just post-secondary. It starts young, the interest and passion in film and music. And so, I just wondered about the younger interest.
Danica, do you want me just to jump in on that in terms of consultation? Yeah, so they were not included at this phase for the consultation, but it's a great idea. I know we certainly want to be mindful of youth and how, like you said, starting early, it's almost like STEM education and outreach, right? In terms of really instilling that mindset of thinking about creative as not only as a hobby, but also as a potential career path, which could be very exciting. And we have, in the collaboration and partnerships, we do recommend, greater partnership with St. Lawrence College and with Queen's University, both for understanding and aligning some of the opportunities that they have for the curriculum that's currently offered, so that you can, train the next generation that are working in the creative industries. And again, get them thinking about it in terms of both interest and future career potential. So it's certainly in there in terms of being thought and recommended, but in terms of the actual conversations with the folks that you've mentioned, that was not part of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Do you want to add anything?
Thanks, Laura. So again, I think Laura's referencing to the stakeholder consultations. So the conversations that we had one-on-one. There was also research done by Laura's team across the landscape and looking at the entire ecosystem. We did, as part of an initial information providing to Laura's team, we did provide a very sort of high-level snapshot of the assets, the creative industries assets in Kingston. Educational institutions were a part of that, and the programs that are within them. So while they may not be referenced specifically through the stakeholder interviews, there is consideration of the educational institutions in Kingston and the programs.
Thanks. Is that helpful, Madam Chair?
Yes, I just know that with COVID and, kids, those high schoolers that may not be able to afford to go away to school, then, that there would be something here. I don't know for that. Yeah, it's just, just thinking about it.
I know I bought lots of art supplies for my daughter when she was doing
from that whole immigration piece, Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions for Laura or for Danica and Colin? Yes, Mark.
Hello. When we're thinking of Queen's University and trying to bridge the gap with that community, who do you go to like who speaks on behalf of them? Is it the AMS, or is there? I think you mentioned somebody else. I didn't jot it down. Was it like Shirk or something like that? Like, does Queen's have like an official representative or spokesperson that is acting on behalf of the arts there, or is it all just the film department, the music department's all kind of standalone? Like it's.
Yeah, so there is actually a committee within, I'm not sure the official title, I'd have to look it up, but there is sort of a council group for the arts within Queen's. And we actually did speak with their chair of that group to be able to understand what they're doing and what they're looking at sort of in the arts, but it is more broad. It's not broken down by music or other, it's more generally speaking, what are they looking at? And SHIRK is a federal program through the granting councils, which is it's basically the social funding. So you see NSERC funding, which is more for STEM research and development. There's a SHIRK funding, which is more focused on social and human sciences, which would include the arts. And so there's a number of faculties, and we can actually pull this information and send it out to you guys if you're interested in that. But part of what we would have looked at in terms of your assets and the R&D, the research and development that's occurring, that funding, and it's like $2 or $3 million, something like that, that's gone to Queen's very recently from that particular program. It's not a huge bucket of money, but you can do quite a bit in that community to be able to drive it. And so we would suggest starting as a starting point with Queen's, with that particular group, because they do certainly have an interest, a vested interest in the sector. They're very passionate about the sector and passionate about Kingston. and then finding ways to be able to navigate through other programs that there could be direct relationships with for film, for example, and maybe the work that Alex is doing. I'm sure he's probably already doing some work with the appropriate department within Queens for that. But that's who we chatted with, and that how we would suggest starting to build out that relationship, because they're definitely interested.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it'd be great if we could see more Queen grads. I mean, this has probably been an ongoing thing for years, but more Queen grads staying in Kingston after they graduate. The Film Festival, we hire 20 Queen's film students every year. I'd say half of them ask for a job at the end of their 4th year, and we're just like, well, we're not quite in a position where we can hire you on full time, but lots are eager to stay here. Like, I don't think there's the underlying assumption that like all Queen students just want to leave Kingston as soon as they're done because they don't like Kingston or they don't want to work here. I think it's just like we're not quite there yet with the jobs. So it's
well, and sorry, Colin, I know you have your hand up, but if you don't mind, if I can just add to Mark's comment, there's a real opportunity with COVID and remote workers. Like, one of the things in the integrated strategy that we're looking at is a remote worker campaign, because again, Kingston, you're right at the center of Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto. And, there could be an opportunity to develop partnerships. We mentioned partnerships with outlying communities, in the film industry, if that is going to be an area that we can really tackle in Kingston. Well, there may be an opportunity to align with opportunities that may exist in Toronto, that they could still work remotely in Kingston. And then that might help to fuel the industry as a whole. If you have those placements for them and they can technically continue to reside in Kingston, there could be some opportunities for that on the remote working. I just wanted to highlight that because with COVID, I mean, it really is a great opportunity for Kingston in particular. Sorry, Colin.
Colin?
Yeah.
Yeah, no need to apologize, Laura. I just wanted to add in response to Mark's question that, I mean, there's a few things there, but retention is a big part of the city's work around workforce development, that not just in the arts, but generally, that we can find ways to create opportunities for students, particularly Queen students, to stay in the community. And I think we're starting to see more of that happen, which is fantastic. And excuse me, I also wanted to mention that it's my understanding that the mayor and our CAO, Lenny Hurdle, have had meetings with Patrick Dean, the principal at Queen's, about the overall approach to this integrated economic development strategy, and that he himself has expressed tremendous interest in the creative industries part in particular. I'm not sure if that's because he comes out of a literature background himself, but we're seeing some uptake. So between leadership at the high level, as well as this council that Laura has mentioned, and then obviously people on the ground through the various creative arts programs at Queen's, I think we have a lot of opportunity there. And I just wanted to share, not sort of building on Mark's question, but just so the committee understands that in terms of process and moving forward, we wanted to give you a chance to learn about this work that we're doing that builds on these council strategic priorities. But in terms of how you'll see this move forward at this juncture, Laura is working with our colleagues on all aspects of the integrated strategy to bring that higher level document to council in December, so that they'll have a chance to review the big picture. And then our plan is to come forward in early 2021, potentially as early as January, with a report specific to the creative industries for council's consideration. So you're getting a first look at what's been brought together with the help of Stiletto, and we really wanted to make sure that you're up to date. And if you had comments, it doesn't have to just be today. You know how to contact Danica and myself if you want to continue to have any conversation about this as it moves along.
Perfect. Danica, did you have something to add? No? Okay. Do we need to, though this is as an information piece, do we need to as a committee, make a motion on this one? No, we just enjoying the information. So great. Thank you so much. That's fantastic, Laura.
Thanks very much for having us. And I did want to highlight, it's the Dean's Council on Arts and Science, Mark. I just found it at Queen's. Okay. So if you want more information, let Danica know, and we're happy to touch base and give it to you. And again, thank you for everybody for your attention. And we're looking forward to seeing how this rolls out.
Great. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay. Where are we on the agenda here, James?
We're at the working group update, and I assume that everyone received the meeting notes in the addendum this morning. So I believe that's the remaining item on the agenda.
Yes, and then I guess is maybe Kiersey can speak after this about some of the progress on this. Councillor Neil and Dean and I, well, they can attest to the fact that it was a pretty smooth process. We met throughout. It took a couple months. And our first meeting, as you see in the report I sent, over a couple months, we did this through Zoom, obviously for COVID reasons. The people that were in the committee that was approved by the Arts Advisory Committee, where it was Jan Allen, Nadine Baker, Dean Burry, Sadiqa Khan, Cassell, Miles, and Councillor Jim Neal. And you can read through kind of what happened at each meeting there in my report, but we approached it differently, as I understand it, than working groups have in the past. And we decided as a group from the get-go to approach each award separately for every meeting that we had in order to be focused. And it turned out really well. We worked really well together, and thank you for curating that group, Danica and Colin. So we did benefit from, I'll just go to the notes section here, so I won't take long, but we were grateful for the templates and rubrics and obviously the terms of reference that were established in the past. So thank you, an official thank you to the groups that were before us, that existed before us. We felt satisfied that decision to divide the meetings by award category. It meant that there was a lot of discussion, and we could really give the proper attention to the requirements for each award. We did, at the end of the process, we did feel that there might be an opportunity for a couple of more awards, only because, as you saw from the presentation there, we are growing in Kingston, and we just felt in a way, and Dean and Councillor Neal can pipe in here if they like, that there were a couple of awards that we could think of, because we were trying to compare apples and oranges in some ways for some of the awards. So we have two recommendations for consideration. One would be an Emerging Artist or Arts Organization Award to acknowledge that volume of work does not necessarily mean that an artist or arts organization is any less impactful and inspiring for the community as a whole. And the other award that we thought, and this could be a part of Arts Champion Award, is that's when it came up with our working group, for an Arts Educator Award to acknowledge that there is value in sharing one's artistic passion and practice with the community in workshops and in the classroom. And sometimes, we just felt that was kind of something that could be looked at. We wrapped up and submitted our nominations to Danica, and then the last thing here was that we also recognized that funding may be an issue to fund another two awards, but we wondered if there might be an opportunity for donor sponsorship opportunities for these extra awards for the community. So I don't know if my partners here have anything to say. Danica, did you want to?
Thanks, Nadine. And I leave it open to anyone for questions, but I just want to comment on a couple of things. First, I want to thank the members of the nominations working group for their tremendous work on this program. It's such an exciting program for us, and particularly in this moment, to continue to be able to celebrate and recognize the arts in Kingston is incredibly important. So a big thank you to everyone. I know it's not an easy job to assess the landscape and whittle it down to 5 people to be recognized, but a job well done, so thank you. I also just wanted to share that in terms of next steps for this program, obviously this is a different year. In normal years, we'd be hosting a fantastic celebration in person in Memorial Hall at City Hall, but unfortunately due to COVID-19, we'll not be able to do that. So we are planning right now to host a virtual event that will give an opportunity to celebrate the recipients in a meaningful way. And we're continuing to work with the Kingston Arts Council on the video profiles, which are coming along really, really well. So we'll be sure to share that information with the Arts Advisory when we get closer to.
Great, thank you. Yes, Councillor Neal. Oh, you're on mute. We just have to unmute you.
There we go. I want to thank everybody on the committee. It was, like Nadine mentioned, it was really smooth going. It was a lot of great discussion, a little bit of great debate. It was a really good group. I just want to mention that Jen Allen was on that group, and it was nice having somebody with kind of corporate memory that goes beyond what my memory was. So she was very helpful in the process. I really think it's a good idea to consider that possibility of expanding this by a couple of, because that was the most difficult, was finding people that were very competitive in the process, but perhaps they didn't have as large a body of work or as long a kind of engagement in the arts in Kingston. And so I think it would be really, really nice for both of those recommendations, but particularly for the emerging artists. And I believe it was Nadine's idea that perhaps we could get a kind of sponsorship for a couple of these potential awards. I'll leave it in Colin's able hands. He always seems to be able to find money somewhere. So
Colin's got his hand up.
Yeah, I think there's some really good potential for adding to this. And so I would normally jump right in and suggest a motion right away, but I'm going to leave it in the able hands of staff to, as Captain Picard says, make it so, if you can. So thank you. And I look forward to Colin's response.
Thank you. It was great to work with the team. Yes, Colin.
Thank you. And through you, Nadine. 2 comments. We have actually put in our proposed 2021 budget an amount to support the Mayor's Arts Awards that would be coming through sponsorship. So that's something that we are making a priority in 2021 to try and find some community support for this. And that was always an ambition with the Mayor's Arts Awards, that we would be able to bring other stakeholders into the fold as part of its evolution. So that is on our work plan for 2021. My other comment regarding these notes, and thank you for sharing those, Nadine, the terms of reference for this program obviously were originally generated through the Arts Advisory Committee and approved up through the Arts Recreation Community Policies Committee and Council. So if there was a desire to look at the terms of reference and potentially consider an evolution of the program, I would probably suggest from a process point of view that the Arts Advisory Committee strike a working group to potentially review those changes and propose amendments to the terms of reference that then Danica and I as staff could then bring forward. I don't believe I have the delegated approval to just change the program without going through a process of assessment and then approval.
Okay, great. So that would be on us, I guess, to strike a group. Maybe we can think about that for the next meeting, I guess, because of the change in recognizing this year too with COVID. I imagine that there would have to be some terminology in there of how, some possible ways to recognize if otherwise, if the in-person ceremony can't happen. Danica, did you have anything to add to that? How would we curate a group?
Well, yeah, so to Colin's point, Nadine, if that's a desire and there's, the Arts Advisory Committee would like to review the current terms of reference. As part of the original terms of reference and development, a working group was formed. There was extensive research undertaken by the group to basically pull together a unique to Kingston program. So the same kind of process would need to be followed if the program was to change and evolve in terms of the new categories. I'm less concerned about the need to shift terms of reference to reflect COVID-19 in terms of in-person or online event. I think we're still able to deliver reach the goal of the event to really recognize and celebrate the recipients. But I think specifically to Colin's point, if there's a desire to introduce new categories, update categories, change elements to the program moving forward, then there'd have to just be a working group formed through the Arts Advisory Committee. Yes.
Okay. Yes, Mark.
There we go. Is there currently anywhere where one can find out, excuse me, about past recipients that have won? Is there a page celebrating? Yeah, there is. Okay. Just because I think anybody in the arts community in Kingston is aware who the winners are year in, year out. I think I've forgotten maybe a few years back who won now, but for anybody who's not in the arts community, whether you're a tourist or a Queen's student, just kind of walking downtown, it would be nice if you could learn about this even being a thing that exists in Kingston. So I think, Danica, you were about to tell me where it actually does exist. But a second thing that we might want to consider is, I forget the exhibit that was outside of, was it just last year? My memory is horrible. Was it Paved Paradise that was outside of City Hall? But it was something like that, acknowledging the winners every year as well, so long as they were comfortable with their face being on a giant sign. But that would be an interesting way to, like, one, show that this program even is a thing, and then also celebrating those artists every year. Not suggesting in lieu of a cash award, but maybe as in addition to. But anyway,
Sure.
Those were just a couple things that came to mind.
Sure, Danica.
Through Nadine. It's a great question, Mark. And so yes, the award recipient information lives online as the sort of the primary source on the City of Kingston website, the Kingston Arts Council website, and Tourism Kingston also promotes the recipients through their Visit Kingston webpage. So there are 3 sort of online places where we promote the recipients, and there's archival. You can see the past recipients from the inaugural year, and the videos live there. We also do an annual exhibition in City Hall of the recipients. So we have, similar to what you're saying, Mark, but within City Hall, an installation where we feature images and information about the recipients of that year. And that stays up again for about a year, and then we turn over on an annual basis. But I think what you're suggesting is a great idea, and certainly something we can look into in terms of increased profile for the recipients moving forward. And so, again, we've got certain infrastructure in the public realm that could be leveraged, as you've referenced, for Paved Paradise. We have these fantastic, beautifully produced videos as well. Again, so looking at, where could those videos be played within the public realm, within venues, within spaces across Kingston is certainly something that we can look into and prioritize for the coming years. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those videos are beautiful. Like so it'd be nice to I don't know, have them play in hockey rinks or something like that.
Totally. Yeah.
Agreed. Agreed. Okay, so I don't think we need to make a motion right now to strike a group, maybe in the new year. I'm thinking, yeah. So we can move along in the agenda. Are there any other motions? Yes, Danica.
Sorry, thank you, Nadine, through you. I just have a question. So the working group, the term for this Mayor's Arts Awards nominations working group, the term has ended. It's now completed. James, I don't know if there's anything we have to do from a process perspective around that, but their term has now officially come to an end. And then Nadine, to your question, yes, in the new year, we will strike the 2021 Mayor's Arts Awards nominations.
Great. James?
Traditionally, the working group just sort of dissolves with the completion of their work. So we don't require a formal motion.
We have dissolved officially. Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. And so are there any other motions? Okay. And
Nadine, Katie had her hand up.
yes. Sorry, Katie. I have it on this weird view. I'm just expanded it. Okay. Yes, Katie. Sorry.
Hi. Sorry, I have to actually go. I'm hosting an AGM in a couple hours that I really want to prepare for. And I also want to encourage the staff, someone to sign up for that. help us out with quorum, that would be really great. But if you need anything from me for this committee, please let me know, but I do have to run. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Katie.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Okay. Yeah, if there's no other no motions, there's no notices of motion, any other business? Yes, Councillor Neil.
Just very quickly, there was a motion that passed unanimously that Rob Hutchison and I put on council last Tuesday in an effort to assist Wendy and the screening room, who understandably are going through some difficult times. And one of the best ways, of course, is for us to go back to attending movie events at the screening room. I went to a movie last night. They have really good social distancing, masking, and there have been no, and I wasn't aware of this till Wendy mentioned it, there's been no recorded case of COVID transmission either in Kingston or anywhere across Canada through tracing. And that's an institution that I don't think we want to lose here in Kingston. So everybody's support for that would be great. Unfortunately, they applied for rental assistance. Their landlord, who will remain nameless, Springer, in fact, did not sign on, so they weren't eligible for any rental assistance. So she has been paying out of her own personal savings in order to keep the theater alive. So anything we can do would be great. So there's your paid commercial announcement for today. Thank you.
Thank you for keeping that in our minds, for sure. There was only a 31% uptake on that rent relief program through CMHC and the federal government. We certainly took advantage of it at the TET Center, and we were successful, which was amazing for 11 impacted tenants in the building. Yeah.
You have a better landlord than she does.
Well, it took time for that application. It was quite involved. I can imagine some people looked at it and thought, oh, no, some landlords maybe didn't want to go through it. Okay, we do have some correspondence. Do we need to formally accept this, James, into the minutes?
It's just there for the record.
Has everyone read that correspondence from Catherine Porter? If we have questions for that or comments, do we just go to her directly then, James?
That's probably best. I believe that she would like to appear as a delegation when we eventually return to in-person meeting setting. However, correspondence isn't really debatable. So if someone has a specific question, it would make sense just to follow up with her directly.
Yeah, okay, that's great. So if anyone has any questions, then we can communicate that way with her. Our next meeting is January 14th. That seems like a long ways away, but I'm sure it'll go quickly.
So can I add something about the next meeting?
Yep.
Staff have been made aware of an operational issue in which the committee will no longer be able to meet at 9:30. So I'll be sending out an email to committee members to poll them to see if they would prefer to meet at 11 o'clock or 1 p.m. on the second Thursday of each month. So we'll see what the outcome is of that, and we'll try to accommodate as many schedules as possible.
Thanks, James. Right. Just let us know about that. Motion to adjourn, I believe, is the next step here. Anyone want to make a motion? Liz, thank you. And a seconder, Kiersey, and then all in favor. Great. and we will adjourn. And I hope everyone has a good end of your week.
Thanks, everyone. Great meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.